You walk out to the shed, and there it is. Not all at once. It never happens all at once. It starts with one thing. Maybe the axe head you left sitting on the workbench after a wet weekend. Maybe the hatchet that came back from a camping trip and got hung up still damp. Maybe the handsaw with that faint orange line creeping along the bottom of the blade that you noticed a few weeks ago and told yourself you would deal with later. Later has a way of turning into never, and never has a way of turning into ruin. You look around and you start counting, the spade leaning against the back wall with the rust climbing up from the blade toward the handle socket. The cast iron skillet on the high shelf, the one you meant to re-season after the last time you used it outdoors. The gate hinge on the far side of the yard that squeaks now and has that dark orange bloom spreading out from the pin. The wheelbarrow with the rust ring around the base of the tray, the toolbox with the hinges going, the truck frame underneath where the salt from last winter has been doing its quiet work. Rust. That is what you are looking at. The slow, patient, relentless eating of your good iron by the air itself. Not dramatic, not sudden, just steady. One season at a time, the orange creeps and the metal beneath it softens and crumbles, and what was once a sharp, solid, dependable tool your father or grandfather handed down to you becomes something you have to either throw away or pay someone else to bring back. And most of the time, people throw it away because no one told them there was another way. Most people fight rust the way the hardware store wants them to. They pick up a bottle of rust converter off the shelf, $15 or $20 or $30 for a jar that treats maybe 1 or 2 tools before it runs out. They buy a spray can of rust inhibitor that lasts a season if they are lucky, and then they buy another one the following spring. And when the tool is too far gone, they buy a new tool. Year after year, the same cycle. Spending and replacing and spending again, watching good iron get eaten down to nothing while the hardware store shelf stays stocked and the register keeps ringing. There is a better way. There has always been a better way, and the reason most people do not know about it has nothing to do with how complicated it is, because it is not complicated at all. It has to do with the fact that the better way costs about $3 and lasts for years, and there is simply no business model in telling you that. Here is what we are talking about: a fine powder, food-grade tannic acid that you can order online or find in certain specialty stores for $3 to $5 for a small bag. When you stir that powder into a cup of warm distilled water, you get a solution that does something most people have never seen and genuinely struggle to believe the first time they witness it. You brush it onto rusted iron, and the rust does not just stop. The rust changes. The orange flaking iron oxide that was eating your tool converts through a real and well-documented chemical reaction into a dark blue-black coating called ferric tannate that bonds tightly to the metal surface and actively protects it from further corrosion. The rust becomes the protection. The thing that was destroying the tool becomes the thing that saves it. That is not a sales pitch. That is not an exaggeration. That is chemistry that has been written down in scientific literature since 1813, used by museum conservators to protect iron artifacts they intend to preserve for centuries, tested by military researchers, and quietly known by blacksmiths and leather workers and country craftsmen for generations before the hardware store decided it was more profitable for you not to know about it. Let us slow down and actually understand what is happening, because the chemistry here is genuinely interesting, and once you see it clearly, everything else falls into place. Iron is an extraordinarily useful metal, strong, workable, abundant, and when properly cared for, nearly indestructible. The problem is that iron wants to return to a more stable form. Left exposed to oxygen and moisture, iron atoms gradually bond with oxygen molecules to form iron oxide. That is rust. The orange, flaky, crumbling compound that spreads across the surface of unprotected iron and keeps going deeper and wider until the structural integrity of the metal is compromised. Rust does not stay in one place. It travels. It spreads. It feeds itself. A small patch of surface rust left untreated becomes a deep pit of corrosion within a few seasons, and a deep pit of corrosion becomes a hole, and a hole in a tool or a vehicle frame or a gate hinge means the thing no longer works the way it should. Now, consider tannin. Tannin, also called tannic acid, is one of the most widespread organic compounds in the natural world. It is found in oak bark, in tea leaves, in grape skins, in pomegranate rind, in chestnut hulls, in the galls that form on oak trees. It is the compound that gives strong black tea its dry, astringent quality on the tongue. It is what makes red wine grip the inside of your cheeks. It is what the old leather tanners used in their bark-filled vats to transform raw animal hide into durable shoe leather, and it is from that ancient process that we get the very word tanning. Tannin has been used by human beings for thousands of years, long before anyone understood the chemistry behind it, because the results spoke for themselves. What happens when tannin meets rust is one of those things that looks almost magical until you understand the mechanism, and then it looks like exactly what it is, which is two compounds finding each other and forming something more stable than either of them alone. The tannic acid molecules bind to the iron in the rust, locking into the iron oxide and converting it through a series of chemical steps into ferric tannate. Ferric tannate is a dark blue-black compound. It is hard, it is stable. It does not keep reacting the way rust does. It does not keep eating the metal beneath it. It sits there, bonded to the surface, and it seals the iron underneath from further contact with oxygen and moisture. The process was first formally described by a French chemist named Henri Braconnot in 1813. He was studying the properties of tannin and noticed what happened when it came into contact with iron compounds, and he wrote it up in terms that are still referenced in conservation literature today. The Canadian Conservation Institute, the body responsible for preserving some of the most significant iron artifacts in existence, publishes the tannin conversion method as their standard procedure for treating corroded iron objects intended for long-term preservation. The same chemistry that turns the rust on your axe head dark blue-black is the chemistry used on Iron Age swords, on medieval armour, on historical farm implements, that museums intend to keep intact for the next 500 years. The same near black colour you will see form under your brush is the colour of iron gall ink, the ink used in handwritten manuscripts that have held their mark for 800 years. Iron and tannin have a long history together. Most people have simply never been introduced to it. Before going any further, one thing deserves to be said plainly. This method works on iron and steel. That covers the vast majority of things that rust in the orange, flaking way that eats tools and frames and hinges and pans. Axes, hatchets, knives, hand saws, cast iron skillets, truck frames, trailer hitches, wheelbarrows, wood stove components, gate hardware, nails, bolts, old farm machinery, garden tools, any iron or steel surface that has developed that characteristic orange oxide. On all of these, the tannic acid treatment works as described. It does not work on aluminum, brass, copper, zinc, stainless steel, or galvanized metal. Those materials corrode through entirely different chemical processes. They do not produce iron oxide. They do not rust orange. And because tannic acid specifically reacts with iron compounds, it has nothing to grab onto with those other metals. Use it on aluminum and nothing will happen. So be clear about what you are working with before you start. If it rusts orange, this is for it. If it corrodes grey or green or white, this is not the right tool. Now let us talk about what to gather, because the full list is short and inexpensive, and everything on it is either at your local hardware store or one online order away. The first thing you need is tannic acid powder, food grade. Search for exactly those words and you will find it without difficulty. It is sold in small bags, typically around 100 grams, for somewhere between $3 and $5 depending on where you buy it. A single 100-gram bag is enough to treat roughly 40 square feet of rusted metal surface. That is most of a small farm's hand, tools, or an entire truck frame, or all the iron hardware around a typical house, all from one bag that costs less than a cup of coffee. Most people who buy one bag report that it lasts them years before they need another. The second thing is phosphoric acid rust remover, which most hardware stores stock under the name Naval Jelly. This costs $2 or $3 for a small jar. Tannic acid alone will do the conversion job, but adding a small amount of phosphoric acid to the mixture produces a meaningfully better result. The phosphoric acid accelerates the reaction, drives the conversion deeper into the rust layer, and converts any iron oxide that the tannin does not fully reach into a second protective compound called iron phosphate. Conservation literature and independent military testing both reach the same conclusion. The combination of tannic acid and phosphoric acid produces a more durable, more complete protective layer than either compound used on its own. Third, distilled water. A gallon at the grocery store is about $1. It is important not to use tap water here. Tap water contains dissolved minerals and, depending on where you live, may contain chloride ions. Chloride is one of the primary accelerants of iron corrosion. The last thing you want is to introduce chloride to a surface you are trying to protect. Distilled water is clean and chemically neutral and lets the tannic acid do its work without interference. Beyond those three things, you need a foam brush or an old cotton rag for applying the solution, steel wool, or a stiff wire brush for surface preparation, and rubber gloves and eye protection. The eye protection and gloves are not optional suggestions. Phosphoric acid is a real acid. It will irritate skin and can cause genuine harm to eyes. Work in a ventilated area. Keep the gloves on. Keep the safety glasses on and handle the Naval Jelly the way you would handle any chemical you respect. That is everything. The total cost, assuming you buy all of it new, is somewhere between $5 and $7. That treats more rusted iron than most households will accumulate in several years of use. Here is how to mix the solution. Take a clean plastic cup or a small container that you do not mind dedicating to this purpose. Pour in approximately 100 milliliters of warm distilled water, which is just under half a cup. Add 4 grams of tannic acid powder, which works out to roughly a level teaspoon. Stir slowly until the powder is fully dissolved. The water will change color as it dissolves, shifting from clear to a deep amber brown, the color of strong black tea brewed long. That color is the tannin, and it is exactly what it should look like. Once the powder is fully dissolved, add approximately 1 teaspoon of Naval Jelly and stir again to incorporate it. The mixture may darken slightly more or may stay at about the same shade. Either result is correct. That is the formula. 3% tannic acid, a small measure of phosphoric acid, distilled water. It is the formula documented in conservation manuals and the one that has been validated through both scientific study and generations of practical use. Now, the application. Before you brush a single stroke of solution onto anything, you need to prepare the surface. Take your wire brush or steel wool and go over the rusted areas thoroughly, knocking off any loose, flaking rust. You are looking for the orange material that comes away easily, the rust that has already detached from the metal beneath it and is just sitting on the surface in crumbling layers. Remove all of that, but do not go further. Do not grind or sand the surface down to bare, shining metal. That is the single most common mistake people make when they first hear about this method, and it completely undermines the chemistry. The tannic acid reacts with rust. If you remove all the rust and expose clean iron, the tannin has nothing to bond with, and the reaction cannot occur. Leave the firm, adherent rust in place. The rust that is still bonded to the metal surface, the rust that does not come off when you brush it, that rust is your working material. That is the rust that gets converted. Once the surface is prepped, brush the solution on evenly. Cover all of the rusted areas. Get into any crevices or recessed spots. The solution is thin and penetrating and will work its way into surface texture, but you want to make sure every rusted area has been contacted. Use a foam brush for flat surfaces and a cotton rag or an old natural fiber paintbrush for irregular shapes and tight spots. Then wait and watch. Within 10 to 15 minutes, and sometimes a little sooner on warm, dry days, the color will begin to shift. The orange rust will start moving through a progression. First it goes darker toward a reddish brown. Then the brown deepens toward grey. Then the grey shifts into a dark blue-black. You are watching ferric tannate form in real time. The chemical conversion is happening visibly on the surface of the metal while you stand there. People who see this for the first time consistently report the same reaction. A kind of quiet disbelief followed by genuine satisfaction at watching something that was degrading become something that is protecting. Once the first coat has dried completely, which takes between 2 and 4 hours depending on temperature and humidity, the surface will have reached that characteristic dark blue-black color and feel hard and dry to the touch. At this point, apply a second coat using the same method. This step matters. Conservation research is consistent and clear on the point that 2 thin coats produce a significantly better result than 1 thick coat. A single heavy application tends to dry unevenly, can form a skin on the outside while remaining partially unconverted underneath, and may eventually crack or lift in patches. 2 thin coats, each fully cured before the next is applied, build up a denser, more uniformly bonded protective layer that adheres more completely to the metal beneath. Apply the second coat. Let it cure for another 2 to 4 hours. When it is dry, the surface should be uniformly dark, firm, and stable. The final step is a protective top coat, and what you use depends on what you are treating. For hand tools, axes, hatchets, knives, saws, and any iron object that you handle regularly and want to keep clean and smooth to the touch, rub on a thin coat of boiled linseed oil or work in melted beeswax and buff it lightly. Both create a water-repelling surface layer that sits over the ferric tannate and keeps moisture from reaching it. For vehicle undercarriages, truck frames, trailer hitches, and structural iron that lives outdoors and takes weather year-round, a rubberized undercoating spray applied over the cured ferric tannate gives a tough, flexible barrier that handles road debris and thermal expansion. For a cast iron skillet or any cast iron cookware, simply re-season it the normal way, a thin coat of oil in a 350-degree oven for an hour, and the skillet comes out as it should, dark, slick, and protected. The ferric tannate layer does the chemical work of stopping the rust. The top coat does the physical work of keeping new moisture away from the surface. Together, they give you a tool or a component that is genuinely protected rather than just temporarily slowed. A word about realistic expectations, because this is where honesty matters more than impressiveness. For most tools kept in a shed or a barn, used regularly and stored dry, the ferric tannate treatment holds for years without any attention at all. The coating is hard and bonded and does not just wash off or flake away under normal conditions. The axe head stays dark and protected through seasons of use. The cast iron pan stays seasoned. The gate hinge stops spreading rust and holds its color. For tools and surfaces that live fully outdoors, exposed to weather year-round, a once-a-year touch-up is a reasonable expectation. This means 20 minutes of work with the same solution, brushed over any spots that have begun to look dull or show wear, left to cure, and done. 20 minutes once a year from a bag of powder that costs $3 and will last a decade. Compare that to buying and applying a rust inhibitor spray every few months or replacing tools every few years, and the math is not complicated. In genuinely harsh environments, particularly coastal areas where the air carries salt, or climates where roads are heavily treated with de-icing salt in winter, the coating will degrade more quickly and may need refreshing more often than once a year. Salt is corrosive to every form of metal protection that exists. That is not a limitation unique to this method. It is a property of salt. A truck frame treated with the tannin method in dry inland conditions and the same frame driven on salted winter roads are going to have different maintenance needs, and anyone who tells you otherwise about any coating is not being straight with you. There is also one nuance worth understanding about the chemistry. Some research has found the tannic acid used alone, without the phosphoric acid, does not always produce a fully stable conversion layer when the rust is heavily contaminated with chloride or other corrosion accelerants. The tannin does its job, but the bond is not as complete as it could be. That is why the formula here includes the naval jelly. The phosphoric acid addresses the portions of the rust that the tannin alone might not fully convert, and the two together produce a more complete and reliable result than either one would achieve independently. Use both. Do not skip the naval jelly. Now consider something for a moment. Everything described here, the tannic acid, the phosphoric acid, the formula, the application method, produces a result that is chemically identical to what you find in a branded jar of rust converter on the hardware store shelf. Pick up one of those jars and read the ingredient list on the back. You will see tannic acid. You will often see phosphoric acid. You will see the same compounds in a smaller container with a professional label and a brand name and a price that is 10 to 15 times what the raw materials cost. The hardware store version is not a superior product. It is not a more refined formula. It is the same chemistry packaged for a market that has been trained to reach for the branded solution. There is no great mystery to why this works the way it does commercially. A $3 bag of powder that treats an entire farm's worth of iron and lasts for years is not a product that generates repeat business. A $15 jar that runs out after treating 2 or 3 tools and needs to be replaced twice a year is. The economics are straightforward. The branded product exists not because it is better, but because it is more profitable to sell. The raw material exists, available and inexpensive for anyone who knows to look for it. The gap between those two things is not a secret. It is just knowledge that stopped being passed down when the hardware aisle became the default answer. Blacksmiths knew this. Leatherworkers knew this. Museum conservators know it today and publish it openly in their technical literature. The knowledge did not disappear. It just stopped being part of the ordinary conversation that gets passed from one generation to the next. And the space it left was filled with products that cost more and work no better. So here is what to do. This week, not eventually, this week, order a small bag of food-grade tannic acid powder, $3 to $5, available through any number of online retailers, arriving in a few days. On the same trip you make to the hardware store for anything else you need, pick up a jar of navel jelly. $2 or $3. At the grocery store, grab a gallon of distilled water. $1. You now have everything you need for years of rust treatment at a total cost of under $10. Go find the rustiest piece of iron you own. It might be an axe head sitting in the corner of the shed. It might be a handsaw that has been hanging on the wall untouched for 2 seasons. It might be a cast iron pan you set aside because you were not sure how to bring it back. It might be the wheelbarrow that has been sitting outside since last fall. Whatever it is, find it. Put on the gloves. Put on the safety glasses. Mix the formula in a cup. Knock the loose rust off the surface with steel wool. Brush the dark amber solution onto the rust and step back and watch. Watch the orange go brown. Watch the brown go grey. Watch the grey go deep blue-black, while the chemistry works right there in front of you. The first time you see it happen, it is one of those moments that is difficult to describe accurately. It is the satisfaction of watching something that was broken become something that is fixed, not patched over, not hidden, but actually converted and made better. The rust is not covered. The rust is changed. And what it changes into is the very thing that keeps the metal safe. Museum conservators use this same chemistry to protect iron artifacts they intend to preserve for the next 1,000 years. The same reaction, the same dark coating, the same ferric tannate forming on the surface and sealing what is underneath. The difference is the scale and the setting. The method is identical, and the powder that makes it happen costs $3 and fits in your hand. Take care of your tools. Bring back the ones you thought were gone. The rust is not the end of the story. It is the material you work with. And once you know how to work with it, you do not look at a rusted tool the same way again. Tell us in the comments what piece of iron you brought back. The saw, the axe, the skillet, the gate, the truck frame. And when you watch that rust turn dark under the brush for the first time, come back and say what it was like. Because it is one of those things you only need to see once to remember for the rest of your life. Do not throw the rusty one away. Bring it back.